Welcome to the Couple to Couple League PeakDay podcast, where we discuss fertility and natural family planning with our friends. Today's guests are Amy and Steve Armour. Amy and Steve have been married 7 years and have one son who will be 3 in November. Stephen is a Catholic psychotherapist in private practice, and Amy leads a variety of global talent management activities, including performance management and associate engagement at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. The Armour family's favorite hobbies include building forts and obstacle courses in the living room, picking fruits and vegetables in the backyard garden, and discovering new everyday adventures around their neighborhood. Steve and Amy learned the symptothermal method of natural family planning before getting married and have enjoyed sharing their experience with NFP at local pre-Cana marriage prep retreats. Thank you, Steve and Amy, for being with us on the PeakDay podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So let's just start with how you two met.
The short version is we met at work. The longer version is I went to interview for my first job out of grad school, and there was a panel interview, and Steve was on the panel.
It was in the interview, her resume. I saw on there that she was had done some work with some Catholic organizations in college, and so that kind of got me wondering if she was at least serious about her faith. And then shortly after meeting her at the interview, I felt very drawn to her, and it's kind of a love at first sight type of a situation. So.
You both happened to hear about natural family planning from the same person. Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, so when I was in grad school, the Newman Center at the University of Akron did a Theology of the Body series where they invited a Theology of the Body speaker to come in and just to, talk through a series of workshops about that. And in those conversations, I heard a lot about natural family planning and how that fit in there. And then you had a similar experience, right?
Yeah, so my senior year of college, I was a philosophy major, and I was taking an ethics class. And we were reading Humanae Vitae from Father Damien Ference. And so we were working through that over the course of some weeks. And then he invited in a speaker who was Jen Ricard. And that's, she kind of gave the first, real introduction into NFP at that time, and really kind of tied together Humanae Vitae and just her work and what she had been doing training couples, and really just introduced all that stuff for me for the first time then.
And then when we went to our marriage prep, actually in a different diocese, because we got married in the Diocese of Youngstown where I grew up, and Steve is originally from Cleveland, and he was living in Cleveland, I was living in Akron, so both living in the Diocese of Cleveland, but we were getting married in the Diocese of Youngstown. And when we went out there for our first marriage prep session, we asked the priest if he had any recommendations of someone for an NFP class. And he said, "Oh, I know this wonderful instructor, and actually she's really close to you. She lives not far from you, and her name is Jen Ricard, and we studied together at the Theology of the Body Institute. We used to carpool." And we both just started laughing because that's the only person that I had that connection with, and so had Steve. And so she ended up teaching us through the diocese our first symptothermal classes as well.
So you both heard about natural family planning, well before you got married. So, couple to couple league really depends on our volunteers who teach couple to couple, and also, on our promoters who all, volunteer their time, telling young men and women and engaged couples about natural family planning. So, how important was that very first introduction to natural family planning in you deciding to pursue that when you were engaged?
For me, it was hugely important because I felt like when we went into marriage prep, I already knew that I wanted to learn NFP. I wasn't just hearing about it for the first time. And I wasn't, trying to wrap my head around what it was and how other people were using it and the whole idea. Whereas I didn't know a lot going into marriage prep, but I knew um, why it was, what the church felt we were called to do in terms of family planning. And I knew how it fit into the various writings, theology of the body and humana vitae and things like that. And I also had several other friends who had been through couple to couple league classes that were already married, who had shared their experience and told me how they benefited from the classes and what they liked about it. And so not only was I sold because I liked the idea and because I knew that's what I wanted to do, but also it just felt really normalized because I knew other people around me were doing it. And it wasn't like I walked into a marriage prep retreat and for the first time was told, hey, here's this thing, you should probably take this class. I already went in looking for it. Yeah, first couple months of us dating, Steve's sister got married, a couple of my friends got married, and they were taking that was when they were taking their couple league classes. And so we were very quickly, we had some good conversations about, marriage and family and things like that. And also, as Steve said, it was cool to know up front that it wasn't just like a non-chemical birth control, but that as we, learned more about it, we were able to see the theology and the richness behind it and, how it fit into the God's whole plan and the complementarity of men and women and things like that. It was cool to already have that background going in.
So, how would you say that having learned natural family planning, about your fertility and your cycles, and along with the theology of the body, how would you say that has impacted you as a couple and you as a family?
Something I think is really cool about NFP is that it really puts the family planning conversation front and center. We naturally are going to have a conversation almost every month about, what are we currently discerning? Where do we stand? Do we need to postpone pregnancy? Are we in a place that we're, we would, that it would be prudent to get pregnant? Well, where do we stand? And that feels really different than a lot of the other options and a lot of the other ways that I'm seeing people experience that conversation. And so it's been really cool and opened up those lines of communication for us in a really natural and integrated way in our relationship instead of having to really build those kinds of conversations in.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really natural for us. I feel like, I mean, it's, it could be kind of I feel like it can be kind of an awkward conversation, but, with regards to just, I mean, from the, very early on, it seemed like it was a big part of our, just communication and being able to talk around, understand each other, understand ourselves even more. And uh, even to this day, it's just grown into a just a natural conversation, a natural part of our existence together.
Going into early marriage, knowing that we were going to, work on charting together, that like Steve was reminding me to take my temperature in the morning and things like that. We not only learned about all of it together, but then we were, having those natural conversations. And it also just gave us some vocabulary around like where I stood, what my hormones were doing, what my cycle was doing, that I don't have to explain everything, or I didn't have to wonder like, oh, is he going to be weird about this or about that? Like, I can say, like pick me up a box of, or I need some extra sleep today, or, like things like that. And it at least, gives us, puts us on, on equal footing with that kind of vocabulary as well.
And I was gonna say, I like how you tied the theology of the body into it, like with that piece there too, because I mean, even though I had an introduction in college, I didn't, it was like, the course of a couple of classes, nothing detailed, and you can say even to this day, Amy does, certainly does a lot of research in those areas, and still to this day, just like, just increases a certain understanding of the body, that even, that still years later, still just kind of brings insights into each other and many similarities, but many differences, and just how that all plays together and how our soul and body work together. And we need to know both to really understand ourselves, I think.
So, Amy, did you were there some health challenges that you encountered, and how did knowing about your cycle and your fertility help with those challenges?
I struggle with anxiety and some other mental health things, on and off some, depression and attention and things like that. And so, when we first got married, I was on a medication that I was recommended by my doctor. Hey, let's not, if you can avoid it, let's not get pregnant until we get off of this medication or we find something that's a suitable substitute. And so we had to avoid getting pregnant pretty early on. And for the first 5 years of our marriage, we had to postpone pregnancy while I was working on what was going to be the right fit of medication for me that was also going to make my OB comfortable with me being pregnant. And so feeling confident in the method and also being so blessed that my doctors were confident in the method that when I said to my OB, this is what I'm doing natural family planning. I'm doing symptothermal method, and don't worry, I wait until after ovulation. Like we're only using that last part of our cycle, part of my cycle. She felt confident and comfortable with that. And so having that confidence was awesome. And also just as I was getting to know myself more, and working through that, primarily that anxiety, getting to see how that aligned with different parts of my cycle, that really showed me the hormonal impact on the way my brain was working and the way my thoughts were triggered and things like that. And really, as recently as when I finished breastfeeding, and all my hormones changed again, um, it it played a really key role in helping me see what of this is hormone shifts, what of this is changes, and when I have something that feels different, when I'm, angry or anxious or something like that, I often can, look back at my chart and go, oh, I'm seeing a pattern here. Which helps me to plan better around it, helps me to have a better conversation with my therapist and my doctor and say, hey, like a million other people, I have these anxious thoughts. I am anxious. And here are some ways that this seems to align with what my hormones are doing. So it's helped us to frame the conversation, and it's helped me to understand too that like some of that anxiety and those mental health symptoms, like they're triggered by hormones, and it makes it easier for me to say to myself like, okay, this is hard, but it's hormones and your cycle is going to move, and next week you aren't going to feel this way.
So, did you have any other challenges during postpartum? You mentioned breastfeeding.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say in general, postpartum is a challenge, right? Um, I was I had an a relatively, yeah, albeit long, easy delivery, and an easy recovery, but we had some latch issues. I had mastitis quite a few times, and then all the things that go with it. You go on the antibiotics, and then you get thrush, and then all of that. I also, our little one was born during the COVID pandemic, and I got COVID 6 weeks postpartum. And that was still during the time that they strongly recommended that if you have COVID, you quarantine even from your family. And they were recommending that I was quarantined from my newborn because we didn't know the impact that it could have on him. And so postpartum, there's just a lot going on, in addition to just adjusting to being parents and having a newborn and all of that. So I say generally, postpartum brings unique challenges for everyone. And it looks a little different for everyone, but yeah, we had some of those things come up, and quite frankly, charting and physical intimacy and things like that were the furthest things from our mind in those moments, because we were just trying to, wrap our heads around how to be parents and how to handle all of that. Exactly. Yes. It's survival. And also just for me, postpartum is just it was just such a cool time and such a cool experience that in addition to the survival, I just wanted to soak up every minute, even though a lot of the minutes weren't ideal with the mastitis and the COVID and the things like that. Um, there's also so many like wonderful snuggly baby moments, that you just, they aren't going to last, and you want to soak all of that up. And so again, going into birth, knowing, well, there's going to be a period of abstinence here. We didn't feel all that blindsided by it, right? It may have been longer than we expected it to be, but things happen, and it is what it is, and it um, being already having built the foundation with each other in the communication as well, was super helpful.
So you both share your, knowledge of natural family planning with young couples that are going through marriage prep. Um, Steve, especially you, with your experience, how do you relate to the young men that are, in those classes? Do you have a chance to share, your experience in particular? Do you have any like one-on-one time with the guys? What do you generally share with the men in particular?
Yeah, but to answer your question though, I think for men in particular, one thing I think I've often said, it was again just like it oftentimes allows again just a good communication. Like it just don't it's we don't be afraid to talk about those things, and even kind of joking with them, just talk about mucus. That's always kind of is like the that's always like the big trigger word, it seems like, for people. But like just I wouldn't say I was ever too triggered by that word, but like
No.
it's just become more
Yeah.
commonplace, I guess. And but I mean, just that's like one like joke I might tie in there, like to the guys in particular, like don't be afraid to talk to your wife about her body and what's going on, because she's trying to figure it out too. Sometimes it's not always so predictable. So um, you know, I think a lot of it comes back to that communication. Oftentimes, like Amy said earlier, like it's like a language of communication. It really gives you to work between each other, and so it equips a woman to understand herself, equips a man to communicate and understand her and himself. So
So, how important was it for both of you to hear about natural family planning before you got married? And how early do you think young people should know about it?
I mean, I feel like it was critical that we knew before we got married, and I loved that we took the classes when we were engaged because we took it together. So we were in a place where we were serious, that I was comfortable being in the class with Steve and learning that information. But it was also early enough that I got to practice charting and I got to feel really confident and comfortable with my ability to chart before I needed to actually put that knowledge into practice for family planning. Um, and as I said earlier, I mean, I feel like just having these conversations and making this feel comfortable early. I mean, when I was 13 and my mom handed me a calendar and said, write things down, it was helpful to me and it made me feel more comfortable as an adult. So I feel like the short version of my answer is, the earlier the better in whatever is the age appropriate way, or the what is appropriate for, the current, whatever your current situation is, your current, what kind of questions or what kind of things are going on around you, what's going on in your family. I mean, every time we see someone who's pregnant, Andy wants to talk about the baby living in their tummy. So, things arise naturally to have those conversations. Um, but I also firmly sit in the camp of better late than never. I have, had um, friends from work who have been, or from, other situations. A lot of our church friends are using NFP already. So it's an easy conversation there. But I've had, friends in other situations make comments about like, oh, I wish there was something else I could do. I really hate being on the birth control pill. And I'm like, what? And I think there's no reason to not learn about it now. It's still going to benefit you from now till forever. So you might as well still have the conversation. And I feel like we both walked out of our first symptothermal class and said like, wow, even just like okay, so even if we stripped the theology out of this, the biology of this class was way better and way more detailed than anything we ever got in school. And like we knew things because we had, involved parents that, like, my mom was like, if you have the body parts, you need to know what they are and what they do. So And I, love and appreciate my parents for that because they made sure I know that. Whereas I had friends that didn't know what body parts they had or how they worked. And, until they were married, or some of them until they walked into a couple league class and came out and said, "Did you know that?" And so it was really cool. We felt like we both, even having that background, we both learned something new in those classes, or had something refreshed, or gained a deeper understanding. And it just, even just the basic biology that's presented in family planning, in fertility awareness, it doesn't have to be positioned just as fertility awareness. It's also like learning about your body and what it does and why it does the things it does.
Yeah, it is definitely a universal need for everybody to know about their own bodies, know about their fertility. I mean, that is absolutely something everybody needs to know, no matter what faith background they have, and then hearing it from a couple who, has experience, with the method, that is absolutely key. All right. Well, thank you, Amy and Steve, for being on the PeakDay podcast with us. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Martha.